Welcome back to another edition of Through the Smoke, a Miami Hurricanes football and recruiting podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Network. David Lake joined as always by Gabby Urrutia. We're here on this podcast to preview a ranked matchup between number 5 Miami, number 18 USF. Before we dive into things, of course, we want to highlight two of our sponsors, starting with Canes Connection. You guys know the deal by now, canesconnection.com. That's Miami's collective crucial part of the program in terms of talent acquisition. Go support those guys, canesconnection.com. Also, the Musarino Law Group. If you've been injured in a slip and fall, boating accident, trucking accident, Uber or Lyft accident, any car accident in general, Nick Musarino is the personal injury attorney you should contact at 561-960-9870. And you can visit his website at flinjury.law. Both of these links will be in the show notes. Okay, Gabby, I'll set the table here with some general USF talk, and we'll bring you into the show when it's time to talk USF personnel. But again, this is number 5 Miami hosting number 18 USF. It's a 4:30 kickoff. It'll be on the CW. And of course, it's Saturday, September 13th. Injury talk, look, everything's kind of, hazy when it comes to injury talk during the Mario Cristobal era. But we do know he announced right on Monday that Hayden Lowe is out for the season, unfortunately. Sounds like he got banged up during camp, so he's got to clean up something, and he'll be good to go next year. I would personally call, this is just me talking, I would call Jordan Lyle, JoJo Trader, Armando Blunt questionable. I think there's a chance we could see all three of those guys. Personally, I don't think Miami needs to play any of these guys this week to get a comfortable win. But let's see if Miami works them into the rotation a little bit, gets them going. Let's also see if Kamal Bonner suits up, and let's see if Charles Brantley suits up this week. Two guys that have been held out of the first two games for various reasons. Going back to this matchup, right? Miami holds the all-time edge in this series over USF 6-1. The last meeting last year was a 50-15 victory in Tampa for the Hurricanes. It was a 22-15 game at halftime, so it was much closer than the final score indicated. Miami did have to fight in that game because USF was a feisty opponent. USF's one victory came at the end of the 2010 season. It was a 23-20 win for the Bulls. That was the final game of the Randy Shannon era. Setting the table for USF in general, their head coach is Alex Golesh. He's also essentially their offensive coordinator. This is his offense that they run. He's in his third season at USF with a 16-12 record to date. He has led his team in his first 2 years, led USF to 7-6 records and gone bowling in each of those first two seasons. And the trajectory of the program this season, they're going to be in contention for that Group of 5 college football playoff spot. But it's really impressive what he's done here when you think about USF in the context of what they were before Golesh's arrival. In his 3 years, in the 3 years prior to Golesh coming to USF, they win a combined 4-29, a bunch of 1-win seasons, 1-2-win season in there. And now Alex Golesh is one of the hottest names in college football for any future vacancies that might pop up here after the season. His background, again, is on the offensive side. He's a Jason Candle disciple from his Toledo days. He's also coached under Matt Campbell, who's also a Jason Candle disciple. He then coached with Josh Heupel at UCF and Tennessee. And I would say the style of offense he runs now is close to that, what Josh Heupel is running currently at Tennessee. Defensive coordinator is Todd Orlando. He was with Mario Cristobal at FIU in that role in 2011-2012. He later in his career went on to be the Texas defensive coordinator. He's been the USC defensive coordinator, FAU defensive coordinator, and now he's at South Florida with Golish, and he's obviously a highly respected defensive coordinator, and he's held some impressive jobs, um, at impressive programs. USF stats coming into this game again. It's only 2 games, so take all of this with a grain of salt, especially from a USF standpoint, because they've played they've played two quality opponents, and so there's really no opportunities for them to stat pad in these 2 weeks. So relative to their ranking of where they stand in these stat categories, take it with a grain of salt. 26 points per game, 381 yards per game, 38% on third down offensively, which is 85th in the country. They have scored every time they enter the red zone, but they do only have a 43% red zone touchdown percentage. They have not turned the ball over in either of their first 2 games, which is, to me, one of arguably their most impressive stat, considering who they've played against in these first 2 games, quality opponents. 5 tackles for loss allowed per game, which to me is good for a group of 5 offensive line, especially, again, when you consider the quality of opponent in their first 2 weeks. Look, I think that defensively, let's go to that side of the ball. Number 81, according to the ESPN S&P Plus in the country. Their counting stats are more impressive, though. 11.5 points per game, which is 30th in the country. 366 yards per game, which is number 93 in the country. 35% third down conversion rate on defense, that's 69th. A 33% red zone touchdown percentage, which is impressive considering who they've played. And this was probably the number 1 stat that led to their win against Florida. That's 23rd best in the country. To me, like the offense, Gabby, we can talk about the personnel here coming up. To me, their offense, when I watch it, it's a feast or famine type of offense, almost like they really need explosive plays. I don't know how efficient they necessarily are on a down-to-down basis, or just that idea of staying ahead of the chains. They kind of need Byron Brown to be a one-man show on offense, whether that's throwing deep balls or generating yards via scrambles. And then they also need like penalties, really help them a lot against Florida. It's kind of, to me, through 2 weeks, it's been kind of a boomer bust type of offense. And so within that idea, I do wonder, like, are they going to have tricks up their sleeve for Miami? We saw that a little bit in last year's matchup. And then defensively, to me, they're kind of a play hard group. Bend but don't break style. At least that's what they showed against Florida, and it worked. Like that style worked perfectly because Florida broke down a lot in the red zone, which is what that style tries to feast on. And USF, nice swarm to the football on defense. Not the biggest body types. They definitely look like a G5 defense on that side of the ball. Just another stat, like 8 penalties per game, which is 108th nationally. So, while they aren't turning the ball over, they're kind of not buttoned up in terms of penalties. But let's flip the page and talk about personnel. So, Gabby, we'll bring you in here. Quarterback Byron Brown, he's the engine that makes them go. What do you like about him?
Yeah, well, I mean, what I like about Byron Brown is that he is, I think he's an extremely physical quarterback. 6'3", 230-pound guy who is not only not afraid of contact, but at times you kind of see him go out and seek that contact, and he's not afraid to kind of drop a shoulder and run through a defender. He is extremely difficult to get on the ground. You kind of saw it in the Florida game, definitely comes up in the Boise State game too, where it seems like defenders kind of swarm him. He seems dead to rights and he escapes, and then he's able to, create big explosive runs out of those situations when he kind of gets through that little, mess that he kind of gets himself in. And then I think what he does with his willingness to push the ball downfield and how he can successful so far has successfully done that. I think so far this season he has, I know he has a 50-yard completion in each of the first two games. One of them in the Boise State game, he hit like a 50-yard pass to Chaz Nimrod that put them in the red zone against Florida. Hit a 66-yarder to Keyshawn Singleton. Like to your point, David, they are a. It seems like it's pretty feast or famine, and it all kind of goes through Byron Brown. And I heard this stat that Tom Fornelli on the Cover Three podcast shared it. Their average touchdown scored on the season this year, David, is 31 yards long.
Yeah.
So that's a testament to how this offense is. It's extremely boomer bust, and Byron Brown is definitely the engine behind that offense. And again, what he can do running the ball and what he can do with the vertical deep passing game is impressive because he can definitely push it. He can push it downfield. I think he has three. When I was kind of looking at three passes of 20 plus yards, and I think he has like 156 yards on those passes. So he's complete. That's an average of like 51 yards or 52 yards per throw per completion that he's attempting 20 plus yards. So they are hitting on those throws that they take downfield, and again, those are explosive plays.
Yeah, to me, like the key with defending a guy like him, because look, he's not a great passer.
No,
Like he can throw
down
the
to
ball
down, no,
far,
yeah, down to down passer definitely not.
but like intermediate wise with accuracy and timing and precision, that's where things break down for him. And so I think the challenge when you're defending him, you got to pick how you're going to make him one dimensional. Whether it's going to be, okay, we're going to let him be a productive thrower, but he's only going to run for 30 yards or less on us. Or, okay, he might run for 100 yards on us, but he's not going to throw for more than 100 yards on us. So there's more than one way to go about it, I think, with defending him. The issue with Florida is they couldn't do that. They
Right.
let him be productive in both those phases, running and passing. And last year, right, Miami, like Byron Brown, I think threw for 250 plus, like 254 or something, but he only ran for like 27. So you gotta, and then Alabama last year, yes, Byron Brown ran for 100 yards or so against them, but he only threw for 100 yards. So to me, they're like the most ideal way to defend him is like, you know, stop him running the ball first and make him beat you with his arm.
Right.
But we'll get into that later. How about his pass catchers?
Yeah.
Um, because to me, like, okay, Byron Brown is their most important player. To me, they need someone to emerge as a playmaker at receiver to really have a chance to win this game. Who caught your attention in that regard?
Yeah, I think both. I mean, both the guys I think have a chance. Chaz Nimrod is a Tennessee transfer who was familiar with Alex Golesh's system from, a guy that committed. I think he played there while Alex Golesh was still there before he took the USF job, and he's been a deep ball target. You talk about a guy that's going to make plays. I know he's been targeted multiple times on some of these deep shots. One of them didn't hit. Another one was completed, and then so he's an older guy, like a 6'2", 200-pound type of outside receiver, who it seems like he has the ability to kind of go vertically. Again, whether he makes those plays is a whole different thing. And then Keyshawn Singleton, you saw that big play that he made in the Florida game. He's a guy that Byron Brown in a situation, and we'll get to it later, where Florida is scrambling, trying to set their defense,
Yeah,
running two defenders off of the field, and it's kind of just like a throw the ball up to this guy. The safety, it seems like guys were out of position, not really ready for that play to be made, and he goes up, catches it, a bad angle by the safety, kind of coming down on it, and he's able to kind of walk it in for a touchdown. So both those guys have some playmaking ability on the outside. Now, are they true total playmakers against what Miami has on the outside? I think that's to be determined. But I
right.
think
You
with the way
can't
that
let
off,
them be that
right,
though.
exactly. And I think that's a part of the equation is just like how strenuous this offense can be because of the pace of play and how quickly they move to not catch, those Miami secondary guys, basically, on their heels when they're running some of these plays to take these vertical shots.
Last year they had a guy in the slot. I forget his name. Sean Atkins maybe
Hmm.
was his name.
Right.
He did a lot of damage against Miami. He was a good college player, very productive in his career. He's no longer there this year. Their slot guy this year appears to be Mudia Rubin, and they do target him a lot, but
Hmm.
he's not, through 2 weeks, he's not the same level of playmaker that Atkins was in the slot. And I think they're missing that, quite frankly, this year compared to last year. How about their running back situation? I think it's fair to say, like, Byron Brown is their
Right.
top runner, but they certainly use their running backs, particularly like on little flare outs in
Yep.
the passing game. Did any of them catch your eye?
Yeah, I think the one that caught my eye most is the Alvin Isaac. He had that big play in the Florida game that kind of set them up, and put him in field goal range to, eventually kick that game-winning field goal. It seems to me like he's maybe the best playmaker of the players in that backfield. But to your point, David, it seems like it is the Byron Brown show
Yeah.
on the ground. But Alvin Isaac is a nice little athlete that they use out of the backfield.
He's 5'9", 185. So, he's probably best in space, and they try to get him the ball in space, throwing it quickly to him. How about their offensive line? Like, look, it's a G5
Mhm.
program, and so offensive line is going to be tough for G5 programs. But I think within that context, I think they got a nice little G5 offensive line.
For sure.
It's guys that started their careers at Power Four programs. You go Zane Herring at left tackle. He started his career at FSU. Connor McLaughlin is the right tackle. He started his career at Stanford. Thomas Schrader is your left guard. Started his career at FSU. Then you got some veterans like a Jack Wilty, who I believe started his career at Colorado. A veteran guy in Cole Best. All these guys too they're older guys,
Yeah.
which you know you want particularly on the offensive line. To me, they look like a decent group of five offensive line.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, I think all things considered, they've done a good job through these two games.
Yeah.
Connor McLaughlin, fun, interesting story time. So when I first got into like just this industry, right before I was with 24/7, I was at State of the U, and Connor McLaughlin was the first ever recruiting story I wrote.
Hmm.
I think Miami had just offered him or something. So he's old because I've been here since for over 5 years now, and this was before then.
Yeah.
So Connor
He's a
McLaughlin
vet.
is an older guy for sure. But he's got some size, He was a guy coming out of high school, that had options that generated a lot of Power Four interest. Again, goes to Stanford, comes back to his hometown. I believe he played at Tampa Jesuit, if I remember correctly, and he's done a serviceable job for them. And again, you mentioned all of the other older guys that at one point were played at Power Four programs. Again, I think that matters at the Group of Five level, and it's why I think, of course, we're gonna get into the the like deeper into this game, but a big part of the way that this offense and stuff is constructed is why I think USF, could potentially ride this thing out and be, a premier group of five program and be a program that
Yeah.
truly contends for that spot in the college football playoff down the line, because they're showing that they can kind of play with some of these teams, and they're not getting absolutely dominated in the trenches by any means. And so it's a respectable group.
Yeah. They're bigger body types. And I think it's really going to show up advantageous for them when they start conference play and start playing
Definitely.
other G5 teams. How about let's flip it to defense? Um, I'll admit, like, again, I think it's a group that plays really hard. But in terms of like highlighting specific players that really impress me, I had a hard time.
Hmm.
Like, okay, let's just start with the D line. To me, like Josh Seliskar stood out. He's their D tackle. I believe he started his career at UCF,
Yeah.
went to A&M, and now he's at
Yeah. I
USF.
think he's like playing on the edge too, and he's like a
Yeah,
6'2", almost 300 pounder. It's definitely unorthodox body type. Like it's just not ideal,
yeah,
Again, it's group to me. This is a group of five defensive line.
right.
I don't think they generated a pressure against Florida, which again, that's a tough matchup. But yeah, I think the defensive line. I didn't walk away from any of the stuff I watched, like kind of enamored by any of these defensive linemen. Truly.
The one guy from like a body type and athleticism standpoint that flashed to me on their defense is Jalen Schuler, their linebacker.
Yep.
He's like 6'3", 230, looks like he can run and tackle pretty well. I think he's a guy that just looks the part the most on
Yep.
their defense.
Yeah, absolutely. He flies around on the film and just watching this stuff. I mean, it's number 7 pops up
Yeah,
constantly. Like he's always around the football. To me, he's their best. He was the defensive player I was certainly most impressed by. Like he looks
yeah.
like a good, fun player, and I think he's going to be a key for the Bulls in this run. And I mean, Mac Harris, who's another linebacker that plays around him, is
He's
another
around the
guy
ball. Yeah,
that plays hard and plays fast. I mean, I feel like David just in general, like it feels to me like the back 7 of this defense just kind of flies. I feel like they're kind of just flying
they're
to the ball. Like,
small, but
yeah,
they play hard.
they play super hard, and I think they definitely kind of play with like an aggressive kind of mentality on the back end of the defense, and I think they've been able to, right? Because I feel like just like the offensive operations that they've been kind of playing with, I think has helped them just kind of play with that mentality, and it's worked out for them. Especially to your point earlier, when it gets to the red zone and it kind of, the field obviously condenses. So it's a nice little group. Another guy. I mean, they got Deshaun Rucker, who was a Tennessee transfer at cornerback.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's James Chenault, number 9.
He
Did
stood
some.
out to me.
Yeah, he does some nice things. Their safety Jonas Cluna or something is another one that I thought had some nice moments. But those are mostly the guys that I felt like were worth highlighting or bringing to the table.
Yeah, James Chenault did have a nice pick
Yeah,
uh,
on that
a-
deep ball from Lagway.
against Florida. Yeah,
Yep.
I mean it was a ball that probably shouldn't have been thrown, but
Right.
Chenault, it was a nice play by
Plan.
him
Yep.
to go get that ball. Um, Again, I wrote on third down. They will bring some exotic blitzes from the safeties. They'll even play
Mhm.
twist games with the safeties when they blitz, safeties and nickels. So that, like everyone, they get exotic on third down. You just got to identify that. And then, they're not the biggest or fastest defense again, but they do play hard. Special teams, I think it's worth noting their kicker. Their kicker's good. Nico
Yep.
Grammatica, he's the son of Martin Grammatica, the former Bucks kicker. I believe he nailed like a 58-yard
Yeah.
field goal last year against Miami. He
Against
might have
Miami. Yep.
might have got hurt or something later in the year. I don't know. Um, but he's a good kicker, and he missed. I believe it would have been was it another 58
Yeah, it was
yarder against
58
Florida?
yarder. Yep.
So he missed it. It was on target, but fell short, and he ended up kicking the easy one through. But he's a good kicker. If this game comes down to that type of margin, um, you know USF has a good kicker, so that's worth knowing.
Yep.
Let's take a break, and then on the other side, we'll talk about this game from a Miami standpoint. All right, we're back. Gabby, you know the drill now. Let's talk about this game from a Miami standpoint in terms of like 3 things we want to see from Miami as it relates to this matchup against USF. The floor is yours.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the things I think is a huge key to this game is I think it's Miami getting off to a fast start offensively. In both games against Boise State and against Florida, USF like their offense was not clicking right away. I think against Boise State, they went into the half with a 10-7 lead, and that game really didn't break open until midway through the third quarter where they ran a fake punt to kind of get that offense rolling downhill. Boise kind of started to have to press a little bit, and I felt like that's when the game kind of got out of hand. And then against Florida, I mean, USF only had 6 points at the half against Florida. So I think if Miami's able to start fast offensively, kind of start, getting the offense rolling, with an efficient passing game that Carson Beck has, that's another thing. I don't think any of these quarterbacks that USF has played to this point have been super highly effective and efficient passers, especially early on in this games. I think Carson Beck, just with the way that Miami's passing operation has looked, I think could present a different challenge to UCF. And I think if Miami's able to kind of get points on the board quickly, maybe get, 2, 3 scores, whatever that looks like in the first half, like I could see a situation where it just kind of puts USF out of their comfort zone, because, especially if that trend continues, because again, it hasn't necessarily clicked for them right away. Again, the touchdown that they had against even Florida, that was in the second half as well. I think it was deep into the third quarter when they had that long touchdown on on really a defensive breakdown. by the Gators. So I think that it's going to be really important for Miami to put points on the board. And I'm going to toss this out there. I don't know if this is gonna stick, but USF has already won two pretty big games as far as just like their big picture season goes, as far as ranked wins over Boise State and over Florida. And I think if Miami's able to kind of get out ahead quickly, knowing the track that's still ahead, which is really USF needs to win the American if they want to potentially be this premier group of five team. I do wonder, with Byron Brown missing 8 games last year due to a leg injury, if if they sort of kind of call off the dogs a little bit and they just kind of say, hey, we have a long way to go and a lot that's potentially on the table to accomplish. Maybe just one that you kind of just tip your cap and get ready for, the conference slate that kind of awaits them.
Yeah, I have a similar point, I think, similar line of thinking in terms of like, I think it's important for Miami's offense to put pressure on USF's offense to
Yeah.
respond. So, similar to your line of thinking, like starting fast, like I think USF is built just with their personnel, they're not really built to play behind if they get in a 14-point hole. I think it's going to be tough for them to climb out of that hole because you don't want Byron Brown to then have to be a drop back passer and productive in that way. One thing that stands out to me too, watching these first two games, is the other teams, for whatever reason, I think it's different reasons in each game, but the other teams, Boise and Florida, did a good job of controlling the clock against USF. Boise possessed the ball for 36 minutes, 21 seconds. Now, USF was explosive in that game
Right.
as they scored. So I think like four of their touchdown drives were in 3 minutes or under. So that explains some of that. But Florida did a good job of possessing the ball, keeping USF's offense off the field, and then their defense did a good job against USF. Florida moved the ball pretty well against USF. They just couldn't score touchdowns. And again, where things kind of broke down, particularly like early in the game, was in the red zone. They were terrible in the red zone. I think they were like one of three red zone touchdown
Yeah.
efficiency, which against a group of five team that's not good enough. You need
Right.
against a group of five team, you need
And they got penalized too, and they had a drop. They had
yes.
tight end just had a
Oh,
drop
it was
touchdown.
self-inflicted the
Yeah, it
whole
was
game.
a ton of stuff. Yeah, yeah,
So, the point is, I think UF had a chance to jump on USF early, and they did not capitalize on those
right.
opportunities. They let USF hang around, and then what happened happened. Uh, but again, I do think there is something to be said in these type of matchups where it's like, okay, your offense, you do want your offense to possess the ball. Of course, the number one goal is to score points. But in addition to that, you want to possess the ball, number one, to keep your defense fresh because USF does play fast. The plays per game doesn't show up yet this season for USF for these reasons we just highlighted. Like last year, they were one of the fastest tempo teams in the country. This year they're not. Last year I think they're in like the high 70s plays per game. This year they're in like the low 60s. Um, but they do want to play fast. Like you watch them, they're playing fast, and they did get Florida, like you alluded to earlier, on an explosive downfield pass where everyone was confused. They got Florida, on a couple of substitution type of penalties, too many men on the field, etc. So they do play fast, and you just want your defense to be fresh and clear-minded in these opportunities. So you do need your offense to not only score points, but to me also possess the ball, which I think Miami is built to do. So dovetailing to your point, I agree. Start fast, but also I think it'll be key for the Miami offense to keep putting that pressure on the USF offense, kind of like how we saw last year with Miami, where they had to play that way because their defense wasn't good.
Yeah.
I think, in this game, if Miami plays that way, I think things start to avalanche a little bit on USF's offense because they're just not built to come back in those type of games.
Yeah,
Uh,
Definitely
But
built for the grind. I mean, that
yeah,
USF offense, it seems.
yeah. Where else are you going with this?
Yeah, I think similar point to what we were just kind of talking about too, just with the defense. It's a lot of just like the communication stuff, making sure everyone's on point as far as just being on the same page as USF is moving fast and going and doing all of those different things. So I think that was obviously a huge negative for Miami last year as they were kind of going through, all their defensive struggles and all of the things that they struggled with a season ago. So I think it's going to be important for Corey Heatherman and his unit to just be really just tight with all that stuff. Because as we know, USF wants to move fast and play fast, and it's going to take again everyone being on point to manage everything that Alex Golesh is going to kind of throw at them with their pace of play.
Yeah, I mean, USF at their best plays with tempo. They're no huddle offense. And so this is the game where we find out if everything Heatherman has been preaching has caught on in terms of just simplicity, the communication, like you said. USF and this style of offense thrives on chaos, confusion, fatigue, physical and mental, missed tackles, etc. And so I agree. Like Miami, we're gonna see if they have taken that next step, communication wise, and playing fast while being simple as well. So in a lot of ways too, Gabby, this is a good test for what Miami will see later on in the schedule for SMU when they go play at SMU. A lot of similarities in schemes in terms of tempo and how they play as well. Anything else you want to highlight?
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit too. Just Byron Brown and the explosives, just not allowing being weary of those explosive passing plays. We know Miami, I think, wants to play kind of some man on the outside with these corners, and I think we know he's gonna take those shots, and then also the explosiveness that he can bring with his legs. Just the way that he is hard to bring down and hard to kind of contain at some of those times. So I think managing Byron Brown and everything that he brings to the table is going to be a huge factor and something that Miami has to, do really well on Saturday if they want to limit, that offense and what they do. Because again, it feels like kind of it all revolves around what Byron Brown can do with his legs and with that arm downfield. Again, the intermediate stuff pretty sketchy. It's not on point, but when he kind of wants to deliver it, you got to be aware of those situations.
Yeah, I'm curious just what the balance is between Miami playing man and zone, frankly, in coverage this week, because man coverage, yes, it's good to take away passing opportunities, but when you play a quarterback like Byron Brown, if the pass rush doesn't get home or the blitzers don't get home, Byron Brown is that type of quarterback that can hit you for a 15-yard gain um, because the DBs aren't watching you. So I'm curious what that mix looks like, man versus zone. For me, Gabby, I kind of would want to see more zone. Now you wanna mix it up, and I think if you do play man coverage, I think you need to blitz him too to kind of ensure that you're gonna get him on the ground. And to me, that's a key too. Like
Yeah.
Miami has to finish off the negative play opportunities. Like Byron Brown killed Florida in those situations where he shook off some sacks. There was a field goal right before halftime where they had him. They had like two guys that should have sacked him on the play. He got through and, set up an easy kind of chip shot field goal before halftime. And look, if we're nitpicking, I think it's fair to nitpick, and there's always things to improve. This was an area against Notre Dame that, Miami's defensive line can improve on. Yes, when it was obvious drop back passing situations, Miami's defensive line did a great job of finishing off those plays and getting sacks, right? But when the game was in the balance, CJ Carr did a good job of extending plays and making those defenders miss. And look, they're different quarterbacks. CJ Carr scrambles to throw, Byron Brown scrambles to run. So I think it's just one thing to kind of track, like um, during this game, how many first downs does Byron Brown scramble for in this game? If that number is like if he's able to scramble for like at least three or four or five first downs on a scramble. Again, not a designed run, a scramble. I'm not feeling good about that. So they got to get them on the ground, finish off those negative plays, turn pressures into sacks, etc. And if Miami can do that, I think that the potential's there that they're going to win big. Anything else you want to highlight?
Nah, that's it for me.
All right, matchup you like the most between Miami and you from a Miami standpoint.
Yeah, from a Miami standpoint, I think the matchup I like the most is the offensive line versus that defensive line. We
I
know
agree.
how big Miami is up front, and we know that USF isn't quite as big up front. Again, like those group of five body types, and again, failed to generate a pressure from the defensive line against Florida. So I think Miami has a significant advantage along the line of scrimmage on that. I think really on both sides of the line of scrimmage, but I
Yeah.
think especially on the offensive line. We know that this is a strength of the team, right? We know that this is a strength of the program, and I think that this is one significant advantage that I think has me feeling good about where they're at, what this game could be going into it.
Yeah, Florida in that game, their offensive line honestly played well. They
Yeah.
against USF. Their pass blocking grade from PFF that in that game was a 94.5, which I guess was their best pass blocking grade in a single game since PFF had been tracking it, which
Wow.
is like 2012 or 2013. And look, I think that speaks more, like, I think Florida's offensive line has some talent, but I think that speaks more to just what USF has in that matchup. Um, DJ Lagway had all day to throw. He was just kind of off with his reads and accuracy. You could tell he's a little rusty. I think you give Carson Beck that time, and,
Correct.
you know, I think the results are going to be much different. So I agree with you on that matchup. That's the one I like the most from a Miami standpoint. How about flip it to the other side, a matchup to keep an eye on, maybe a little concerning from a Miami standpoint.
And for me, it all comes down to the mobility of Byron Brown and just all the trickiness that comes with playing against a quarterback that has those traits and has those abilities to just kind of make something out of nothing, which is what we kind of often see Byron Brown do over the past 2 weeks. What he did against Boise again is so impressive, and the way again, he just looks like there's nowhere to go, and how he fights his way out of things, and then and is able to take off. I think just containing that mobility and obviously dealing with it, dedicating the proper amount of numbers and bodies to limiting how effective he is on the ground is something that's concerning because again, I think with a guy like that, it's just dicey. I think Miami has obviously the defense to handle it. I think they have the personnel and everything in place to contain it. But I think he's a talented player, and I think what
Yeah.
what that brings to the game is always difficult to prepare for.
He single-handedly beat Florida. Um, Florida allowed them to stay in the game for him to beat the Gators,
Yeah.
but he's the reason why they won that game. And I agree with you. Like, I think we saw last year, right, against athletic quarterbacks like Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor in particular, kind of struggled to finish off those pressures into sacks. This offseason, they really dedicated themselves to improving their conditioning level, improving their athleticism a little bit. And so I'm curious how that plays out on the field Saturday in terms of like, okay, when you get this when you get the opportunity to get this guy on the ground, are you going to be able to do it? Are you going to be able to get the job done against athletic quarterbacks? Yes, it's hard, um, but they need to win those opportunities more than not. How about a player that needs to step up? However you want to read into
Yeah.
that phrasing.
Yeah, I feel like we've been talking a lot about the USF offense, so I want to flip it to the other, just to
Good.
Miami's offense, and I think someone I want to see step up in a game like this is Elijah Lofton. And again, watching that Florida game, it seems like there was opportunities for the tight ends to make plays. Tony Livingston, I think, had a touchdown in that game, and then he dropped a touchdown, and I think there were other opportunities where another one was wiped off the board. I think that this, we saw, we've seen all the Elijah Lofton stuff and how he could be a mismatch we haven't seen a ton of it, for through the first 2 weeks, and maybe he's a little banged up and whatever the case is. But I think that this could be a nice potential like coming out party type of game for him in the 2025 season because I think we know he has talent. We know how versatile he can be, and I think these are the types of games where that versatility and that kind of mismatched nature that he has with just how unorthodox of a player he is. I think this is one of those opportunities to kind of have an Elijah Lofton type of game where it kind of just clicks, starts building that confidence, and just kind of finding the groove within what Miami's doing on offense. I think the ball can obviously go a lot of different ways in a game like this, but I would like to see Elijah Lofton kind of
Yeah.
step up and be the player that I think all offseason I think the program believed he was going to be. So far, it's been, not a lot of him, but I think it's a unique opportunity for him in a potential good spot where it seems like again, tight ends have found well, last week tight ends found success and opportunity in against this USF defense. So curious if we get some Elijah Lofton juice in this one.
I like that one. That's a nice pick. I'll go with Keonte Scott.
Yeah.
Um, just because I think, he plays nickel, of course, and this offensive system requires a defense to have a good nickel that can cover, support the run, cover a bunch of ground, because USF will line up wide with their formations. Scott played through 2 weeks, he's played so fast, and I think
Yeah.
he's been a significant year over year um addition here to the defense. Last year's nickel situation just wasn't good. And I think it first got exposed last year in this game against Sean Atkins, right? Now, I don't think USF has the personnel they had last year in the slot to necessarily expose it, but I do think, you got to swarm to the ball, you got to defend the run in space, and I think the nickel is still critically important when facing this type of offensive system.
Absolutely.
How about a potential player of the game? Where are you going with
Yeah,
this one?
my potential player of the game is Keonte Scott. So for all of the
Okay.
reasons that you mentioned, I mean, he's been exceptional against the run so far this season. I mean, he had that 77.7 run defense grade against Notre Dame. Obviously, he was exceptional against Bethune-Cookman. He had those 3 tackles for loss. I think with a running quarterback like Byron Brown, Keonte Scott has a huge opportunity to kind of make a statement, right? And another guy that's trying to play his way into the NFL. A big part of a
Yeah.
nickel being able to kind of make that transition over is being able to play and stop the run. I think he's proven that he's physical, that he's willing, that he's able, and I think Keonte Scott could be a huge, huge factor for Miami in just these efforts to contain Byron Brown. And if he brings it, he's going to be a nice little. I think he's going to be a nice just player to have on the field to kind of manage this situation. I think he's going to do a really good job. I'm a big fan of just what I've seen from him
Hmm.
so far. I think we got him. Miami got him. I think we were eager about having a true nickel on the roster. Again, I don't think I really truly maybe understood how truly valuable that is, and I think having it now and having a good solid player in that spot who can truly play the run and defend the pass has been super valuable for Miami. I think he's going to have a huge, huge game. And then to your point too, it doesn't seem like the slot receiver for USF is all that like, got a circle. Like last year, Sean Atkins was kind of like the guy their offense ran through. When they don't have that slot that the offense is going to run through, I think it's going to give Keonte Scott more flexibility to be committed to, helping in the run game. So I like Keonte Scott to have a big game for Miami on Saturday.
For my potential player of the game, I'll go Malachi Tony. I think we're gonna see his first 100-yard game of his career. It just seems like Carson Beck and Malachi have a special connection and chemistry on the field. Seems like like when Tony runs those option routes, Carson just knows what's coming before he
Yeah.
runs it. And I don't know, frankly, if USF has the nickels to cover him.
No.
And he's had 80 yards in each of these, at least 80 plus yards in each of these first 2 games. And I'd be shocked if he doesn't hit that. And I'd be surprised if he doesn't get 100 plus on Sat, especially, and again, USF can change how they approach, schematically week to week to week. If they play the same way against Miami that they played against Florida, I think Malachi Tony's going to have a huge game. Um, but I think that's up for debate because the quarterbacks are so different. DJ Lagway
Yeah,
throws it deep, and Carson Beck is more of your, work it down the field methodically type of quarterback.
for
All
sure.
right, lines and odds for the game. Um, Miami is a 17.5 point favorite. The over under is at 56.5 for this game. And so, Gabby, let's give you the floor. Let's get our prediction in, and we'll see how it looks as it relates to the lines.
Yeah, I think Miami's going to win this game. USF has been a great story in college football through 2 weeks. Those two ranked wins are big time. And going out and beating Boise State, who played in the college football playoff last year, was a huge kind of just stamp that they're here doing it in such a huge way with the emphatic 34-7 win, and then going into Gainesville and beating Florida in the swamp, even though, again, I think that was extremely self-inflicted by Florida. It's still, worthy of all of the recognition that they're getting, and winning games in college football is very hard, and they have found a way to do that. I think Miami presents just a different challenge when it comes to just potentially overwhelming a team like USF. And I think that the Hurricanes are going to get it done, man. I think that Carson Beck and this offense, the way that they can kind of be methodical, the way that they're going to be efficient and moving the ball down the field, I think presents a different challenge to that USF offense. I mean, to that USF defense. And again, I think Miami has the horses on defense to kind of limit and contain Byron Brown. I got Miami winning 31-17. So not quite covering the spread. I think that this game will be competitive for a half, maybe the way it was a year ago, maybe a little bit deeper, but I think Miami has a chance to kind of also just kind of blow this thing open, similar to it was last year, where it ended up being 50-15. I think that this game has like bigger potential, like covering the spread would not surprise me. I don't know if I'm going to predict that, but a nice little two-touchdown win is, I think, more within the realm of possibility here.
I'm with you too. 34-20 is kind of what I got. Two touchdown type of win. Um, I think it's going to be a comfortable win for Miami. I think this could be a big win if the Hurricanes like force some turnovers, which we haven't seen USF turn the ball over yet. But if Miami can force some turnovers, I think I think the game can get away from USF. And look, I think we saw last week against Florida what the game looks like if the game is close. It's the same script of play with your food in the red zone on offense, lose the turnover battle, commit costly penalties. If Miami starts doing that, USF is good enough to go finish the game against them. So, look, I'll say this too. Like, this might come back to bite me, but I've watched this USF game a few times now, honestly. And mainly I've watched it a few times just because Florida is the next opponent. So it helps you get a nice read on Florida too. The more I watch it, the more I think number one, Florida's not as bad as everyone's making it out to be.
Right.
And number two, I don't know if USF's as good as everyone's making them out to be. Um, Look, there's no excuse for Florida losing that game, and USF deserves a ton of credit for winning that game on the road against a ranked opponent that is far more talented than they are.
Right.
Um, but we've kind of already talked about it. Like Florida lost that game because of dropped touchdowns. There was like, again, this happens in a game and you just have to respond. But like there was a phantom offensive pass interference call that wiped a touchdown off the board.
Yep.
So, I mean, look, and I think it's fair to like criticize and disagree with Billy Napier's game management at the end of the game. But DJ Lagway threw a dime to Vernell Brown
Yeah.
with like 2:40 left in the game. If Vernell Brown catches that, it,
Touchdown.
it might be a touchdown. If it's not a touchdown, they're in the red zone
Right.
and the game's probably iced and over. So,
Hmm.
look, USF deserves a ton of credit for winning that game. It definitely put them on the map, and they should be looked at as the best G5 team in the country right now this year. I'm just not like the more I watch that game, the more I'm just kind of like, okay, I think Florida. I think Florida can get back on track easily. And I think USF, you know, I've heard a lot of people say this, and I agree. Like the fact that USF beat Florida does not help their chances to beat Miami because now Miami's ready and they're
Yeah,
focused and they know,
my
like,
on the radar.
right. So,
No sneaking up as a no sneaking up on this on Miami as this one.
right. So, look, I think USF's a good team. I sound like I'm talking down on them. I'm not, but 34-20 is kind of what I got. And, it'll be a nice ranked game for the Hurricanes.
Yeah.
Let's see if they can handle business.
Yeah, nice resume booster.
Appreciate everyone for listening. Go check out InsideTheU.com all weekend long. We'll have plenty of content rolling over there surrounding the game. Thank you to our sponsors, as always. And until next time, take care.